All right, welcome. Today we're going on a pretty incredible journey. We're heading up, way up, into the thin air of high altitude. We're going to break down the amazing and sometimes terrifying battle your body wages just to keep you going when oxygen gets scarce.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever been on a long flight and just felt off? Strangely tired, maybe a little lightheaded, just not quite yourself? You probably just figured, hey, it's travel. But what if I told you that feeling, that was your body's very first response to being in a low oxygen environment? Yep, that little bit of discomfort is the start of a physiological war your body is built to win. Today, we're going to follow that whole journey from the cabin of a plane all the way to the death zones of the world's highest mountains to really get what's happening. Let's start the climb. Okay, first, we have to meet our main opponent, hypobaric hypoxia. Now, there's this huge misconception that there's just less oxygen at high altitude. But the wild thing is, the percentage of oxygen in the air, about 21%, it's the same on Mount Everest as it is at sea level. The real problem? It's the drop in air pressure. There just isn't enough force, not enough push to get those oxygen molecules out of the air and into your lungs. Your body is literally starving for oxygen, even when it's all around you. So let's start moving up. As we ascend and that air pressure just keeps dropping, our body instantly, and I mean instantly, knows something is wrong. It recognizes the threat. It knows that without a super fast, coordinated response, our cells, our organs, our brain, they're all going to start to fail. And what happens next is frankly incredible. Your body doesn't just do one thing. It launches this massive, full-scale, multi-system emergency protocol. You can picture it like an internal red alert, where every single system gets called to action to squeeze every last bit of value out of the oxygen it can find. And this just shows you how coordinated it is. Your sympathetic nervous system just slams on the accelerator, making your heart pump faster and harder to get that oxygenated blood moving. Your lungs kick into overdrive. You start breathing faster and deeper. That's called the hypoxic ventilatory response. At the same time, a signal goes out to your bone marrow to start cranking out more red blood cells. They're the oxygen delivery trucks, after all. And get this, even your kidneys get the message, and they start working to adjust your blood's pH, which gets all out of whack from that heavy breathing. It's a total symphony of survival. And to make every single one of those heartbeats count, your body does something that sounds, well, pretty drastic. It starts dumping fluid. Your plasma volume can actually drop by 20% in just a couple of days. By getting rid of that liquid, it makes the remaining red blood cells more concentrated. It basically turns your blood into a more potent oxygen delivery system. It's a really clever, if a little extreme, survival move. Now your lungs, they have their own special trick. It's called hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction, or HPV. See, at sea level, if a part of your lung isn't getting good airflow, the blood vessels there squeeze shut to send blood to parts that are working better. It's a brilliant system for matching blood flow to airflow. But at high altitude, the low oxygen is everywhere. So what happens? All the blood vessels in your lungs start to constrict, and that jacks up the pressure inside them. And while this is a really important first response, it can also become the trigger for one of altitude's most deadly problems. So what happens when we go up too fast, or when our bodies just can't keep up with the changes? This is where the journey gets really dangerous. It's where the body's attempts to save us can actually start to hurt us. The most common problem you'll run into is acute mountain sickness, AMS for short. And honestly, it just feels like a really nasty hangover. The key symptom, the one you absolutely have to have for a diagnosis, is a headache. From there, you add points for other stuff. Feeling nauseous? That's a point. Totally wiped out and weak? More points. Dizzy? Add another. If your score adds up to 3 or more, you've got AMS. It's your body's way of screaming that it's losing the fight and it needs more time. And this leads us to the absolute golden rule for prevention, a mantra that mountaineers have sworn by for generations. Climb high, sleep low. What this means is you can push yourself to a higher altitude during the day to explore, but you have to come back down to a lower elevation to sleep. Your body does most of its heavy lifting for acclimatization when you're at rest, so the altitude where you spend the night, that's the one that really counts. Now, ignoring AMS can have absolutely lethal consequences. The illness can progress to something called high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE. This is when the brain actually begins to swell. The telltale signs are ataxia, a loss of coordination where someone literally can't walk a straight line, and confusion. HACE is an all-hands-on-deck medical emergency. It can go from confusion to coma and death in just a matter of hours. The only thing that works is to get down immediately.
The other big killer is high-altitude pulmonary edema, or HAPE. Remember that massive pressure increase in the lungs from HPB? Well, with HAPE, that pressure gets so extreme that it forces fluid right out of the blood vessels and into the air sacs of the lungs. The person is, quite literally, drowning from the inside out. This quote here describes one of the most grim classic signs, a cough that brings up this pink, frothy fluid. Just like HAC, HAPE is a race against time where getting to a lower altitude is the only cure. But look, the principles of altitude physiology aren't just for people climbing Everest. They have critical implications in a whole bunch of other high-stakes medical situations. For anyone with pre-existing conditions, especially heart or lung disease, the stress of altitude can be totally catastrophic. For kids, the symptoms of AMS, like being tired and irritable, are so vague they can easily be missed or just brushed off as a tired kid on vacation. That makes it dangerously easy to miss. And for pregnant women, that low oxygen environment can pose a real risk to the developing fetus, potentially restricting its growth. Now think about this challenge for a second. Anesthesiologists working at high altitude are facing a double whammy. Not only is their patient already fighting for oxygen, but the anesthetic drugs themselves can actually shut down the body's vital responses, like the drive to breathe. And on top of that, the low air pressure can make their equipment, like vaporizers and flow meters, go haywire, making it incredibly hard to deliver a safe dose. Which brings our journey full circle, right back to where we started, sitting inside an airplane. Because everything we've been talking about, all this physiology on a mountaintop, it applies directly to every commercial flight. Commercial jets fly way up there, at 30,000 feet, but the cabin isn't pressurized to sea level, not even close. It's actually pressurized to an equivalent altitude of 2,606 meters. That's over 8,500 feet. For most of us, it just makes us a little tired. But that fatigue, that's a mild form of the exact same physiological stress a climber feels on a mountain. But the stakes get way, way higher during aeromedical transport. You have a patient who is already critically ill. Now you're going to subject them to a rapid ascent to 8,000 feet. You've got Boyle's law working against you. As pressure goes down, gas expands. That means any air trapped in a collapsed lung or in the gut can expand dangerously. Even the air in the cuff of a breathing tube has to be constantly monitored and adjusted. It is an incredibly hostile environment, and serious problems happen in over 5% of these flights. And here is a number to make that risk feel very real. Just going up to 2,500 meters can cause the air in a breathing tube's cuff to expand by about 35%. If you don't check that, the expansion can cause serious damage to the airway. It's a perfect example of how this invisible physics creates life or death challenges up in the air. So, from the subtle fatigue on a flight to the life and death struggle on a summit, our bodies are constantly adapting to the invisible forces of our environment. The physiology of high altitude is an extreme example for sure, but it is a powerful reminder of the complex, resilient, and fragile systems that are working tirelessly every single second just to keep us alive. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what other invisible battles is your body winning for you right now?